What is the creepiest thing that's happened to you personally that made you question reality? I'm curious if anyone else has had this happen. Years ago, my then wife and I would run into the same woman everywhere we went. And I mean everywhere we went. This went on for about a year. Go to the grocery store? She would be there shopping. Starbucks? Yep, sitting right behind us. Walking around the mall? She would pass us walking in the other direction. Movie theater? She'd be behind us in line getting popcorn. The creepiest encounter was while driving on the freeway. My wife looked at the car next to us and screamed. Yep, it was her. She was always alone, never talked to us, and always made eye contact. She had a very unique appearance. She was very tall, very thin, and had very tight skin on her face. It was so unusual that we joked that we were being studied by an alien. It was some serious glitch in the Matrix stuff. One morning I woke up to my alarm going off at 6:30 as usual, and got up and cooked breakfast. As soon as I sat down to eat, my alarm went off again and I woke up in bed. I dreamed that I woke up and went about my morning routine. That was easily the most disorienting thing I've ever experienced. I am a TA in our college's anatomy class, which takes place in the cadaver lab, dead bodies. Late one night, I am working alone in the cadaver lab and I start to hear a noise. It's hard to tell what the noise sounds like, but it's a consistent muffled noise. So I kind of walk around the room and locate it. Now, normally the bodies are all kept in these big metal crates, but at the time we had one more body than we did crate, so one body was in a plastic body bag and that's where the noise was coming from. So I am terrified at this point, all alone in the lab, looking down at this plastic body bag that I can see the outline of the body that presumably is coming back to life because it is definitely making noise. I stood over this body for a solid minute, debating whether I should open the bag, and finally the noise just stops. I got all my stuff together and bolted from the lab. A couple weeks later, the professor tells me to be careful if I ever work on that body because there is a live pacemaker in it, so don't cut into that, and it will vibrate and ring every few hours if it's low on battery. I let out the biggest sigh of relief that we weren't haunted. Once woke up to the sound of heavy breathing and felt as if I was being watched. I couldn't move for a while either. Then I just blurted out my dog's name and kept calling for him. He didn't run over, and as soon as I could get myself to move I went looking for him. Found him sitting in the kitchen doorway, just staring straight forward. I started calling him from right behind him and he wouldn't even turn around. Then I touched his back and he turned to glance at me, but went right back to his trance. A year or so after the fact, I found out that the first thing was probably sleep paralysis. Not too sure about what was going on with the dog though. Not necessarily creepy, but definitely made me question reality. I used to work in a gas station. One regular customer was like night and day. One day he'd be soft-spoken and shy, the next he'd be obnoxious. His cigarette preference also changed from day to day. But he always came in the same work truck with the same guys at the same time of day. One day, he walked in and went straight to the bathroom. A minute later, he walked in again and came to the counter. Twins. It took me 8 months to realize they were twins. And not even identical twins, either. They just looked really similar. My wife and I had a 2-hour drive back from St. Louis to our home, during which both of us lost time, woke up 3 hours later, still an hour and a half away from home, only having used enough gas to go that half hour, and our GPS showed we had been driving our normal route. We still have no effing idea what happened, but we know we hadn't pulled over and that neither of us had any memory between taking an exit and seeing this one particular billboard for a restaurant we always pass. Still freaks me the F out. My SO and I are from different states, but we used to vacation at the same location. Saw what I believe to be myself at middle school age, in the back of one of their pictures. There was an old man who lived on the road I drove every day to get to the highway. He sat on his front porch drinking his morning coffee, and he always waved at me when I drove by and I always waved back. This went on for the better part of a decade. One day I was talking to my neighbor about how much Mr. So-and-so waving made my morning awesome, and I was glad he was still kicking around. My neighbor says, "Wait, what? He has been dead for 3 years. Never saw him again. Who was I waving at?" Woke up to my granddad standing by the door staring at me. Scared the crap out of me, and there was a flash and he was gone. He's been dead about 7 or 8 years at that point. I asked my mom and she said, yeah, he often did that. He'd wake my nan up for work by knocking on the window. I was driving back home at night a couple of weeks ago and I passed a sign that stated a town was coming up. This town is 10 miles from my hometown, the sign said it was 10 miles. So, I continue driving. I drive 10 miles, don't see the exit, look up and see the sign that said the town is 10 miles away. It was like I hadn't moved. I went past the same exit again too. No one believes me. When I was a kid between 8 or 9, I used to wake up every night to headlights coming through my bedroom window. The lights would then stop and turn off, not as if a car drove by but as if they were turned off. Then the long shadow of a man, as if were looking through my window, would pass by and stop in front of my window. I would lay really still and pretend nothing happened, every night for months. Eventually I convinced myself it was imagination. Now that I think back, it stopped when my stepdad moved in. My mom was single, but I was convinced it wasn't real. Across the street lived my best friend whose mom was also single, and she refused to sleep in her bedroom. Her window faced my window. She told me years later it was because every night a man would park in her side yard and walk over to my yard. The long shadows were from the light in her yard. She eventually decided it was my dad checking on us and never told me until I was a teenager. It wasn't my dad. I asked him. So I thought I was crazy and hallucinating for years, and perhaps I wasn't, or 2 kids were having odd dreams at the same time every night. Either your stepdad was stalking mom, or the stalker got scared off when he moved in. Posted this before but thought it would fit here too. By my hometown there was a hiking trail that people went to very infrequently. It was along the side of the Niagara Escarpment, so it had some climbable cliffs and some very shallow caves that you could crawl around on. I went with some friends when I was 19-20 and we were crawling around and found a cave that went pretty deep. We had never been in there before, had never even seen it before. So we pushed forward and decided to check it out even though we had no flashlights, and this was when cell phones didn't really have a flashlight function. We stepped into the cave and it was easily 20 to 30 degrees cooler than outside. Upon looking around with which light we had, we noticed it was really clean inside the cave, as in it didn't have beer cans littered everywhere like all the other small caves did. While in there we got a really eerie feeling after being in there shortly, hearing weird and strange things. Feeling like we were being touched, poked and pulled, and not having any way to figure out who was doing it because it was too dark. We were just using lighters to see what was around us. We were convinced one of us was messing with the others. Although any time we sparked up a lighter, we were all decently far apart. We decided to hightail it out of there after only a few minutes, convinced to come back with flashlights. We came out to see that it was now dusk outside. When we entered it was midday. Somehow, we had lost roughly 3 hours inside of this cave. We went back with flashlights the next week. But have never been able to find this cave again. Don't use lighters in a cave, it literally could have exploded. At least 6 times in my life I've gone home. I know I locked the door, but when I'm about to put my key in, the door opens like someone was expecting me, but no one's there. It's happened at my mom's house, my house and other people's houses. I was helping my buddy move into his new house, and when we came back with more stuff, I had to pee, so I ran to the front door and it opened. When he came in he said he locked it before we left. Don't know what it is, but maybe it's a superpower. I dreamed it was dark, raining, and I was in the woods walking towards a campfire. There were 3 men around it whom I had never seen before. One was wearing a shirt and pants with huge white and black horizontal stripes on it, such as a prisoner might wear. I could not figure out why I was not scared in my dream. Fast forward 10 months later, we're hunting and camping. A friend brings along 3 of his friends that we had never met before. I have to go to the bathroom, buried a 50-gallon drum and put a seat on it, and my husband walks with me since it's dark. We start back and it starts to rain. We get to the clearing and there are his 3 friends around the fire, one wearing the outfit described above. I wasn't afraid in my dream because my husband was behind me and I just couldn't see him. No one believes me. I worked at a small retail shop that sold mostly small accessories and clothes. I have never really believed in ghosts, but my coworkers always swore the place was haunted. Lights would flicker randomly and canvases would fall violently to the ground despite my efforts of propping them up so that they didn't. The thing that really made me question everything happened when I was closing alone at night. We had a sunglass display in the middle of the store. Just a flat glass shelf with a bunch of sunglasses laid out nicely on top. I walk past it to the register and hear this huge crash. Look back and all of the sunglasses were on the floor. It looked like somebody just took their arm and dragged it across the shelf, pushing them all off. There wasn't anything above the display, so nothing could have knocked it off. I don't have an explanation for it. It was right as I was about to close too. He was a rude ghost. I've told this before, but about 7 years ago I was at my mom's house, I live next door, and this white car pulls into the driveway. We weren't expecting anyone, so I assumed they were lost and needed directions, and went to the door. A white woman in her 50s or 60s got out, along with a 9 or 10-year-old black girl. Surprised me because I expected the kid to stay in the car if they just needed directions. I open the door and the woman kind of nudges the girl towards me, both with big smiles on their faces. I said, "Hi, what can I help you with?" She asked if I was Baggy Raccoon, my name, and I said yes. She told me they went to a neighbor's house looking for me, and they pointed her to our house. They just kind of stared at me expectantly, like I was supposed to know the girl and be happy to see her. When I didn't react, the woman told me they were here to see the dentist. No dentists here. Small ranch-style house in a fairly rural neighborhood. No dentists here. Not anywhere near us. The woman and the girl just kept smiling. They didn't look confused. They just kept saying, "Are you sure?" Finally, they left and later I asked the neighbor who directed them to our house, and she said she never told the woman my name, that the woman asked for me specifically. It's always kind of haunted me. I really feel like I was supposed to know that girl. Like, if I was a guy, this would be someone trying to introduce me to a kid I didn't know I had. I honestly started wondering if I was nuts and had given up a child for adoption. It was that strange of a feeling. My mom firmly believes the girl will come back someday to tell me what it was about, and I think about it frequently. Drives me insane to wonder what they really wanted. Dentist was definitely code for something, and they just got the wrong house. Maybe you had the same name as whoever they were supposed to meet. Kind of freaks me out thinking it might be human trafficking or something. Did the little girl look scared? It definitely didn't feel sketchy, like there was something criminal going on. It felt more like they were trying to meet me without telling me why. Like they were excited to see me for the first time or something. The girl didn't look scared, just like they were waiting for me to realize I knew her. There were two. The first one was a UFO. I saw a light streak across the sky, make a 90-degree turn and streak away until it vanished. Years later I learned that it was probably just an asteroid breaking up. Put that one to rest. Once, when I was about 8, we were driving along a road in the back country and I was staring out the window. And in the distance in a field I saw a silvery green glowing cloud that was completely unnatural. It suddenly moved, almost ran, towards the road, then up a tree just as we were passing it. As we climbed a hill, I saw it drop from the tree onto the road and float back into the fields. When I was 19 I worked third shift and was a little paranoid. I would take different routes to and from work, just in case. One night as I was driving to work, I saw what was the stereotypical death. Black hood, no face, scythe. It was just standing in a field, leaning on the scythe and watched me go by. I freaked. Once I got to work I called my best friend and told him. That way if I died someone would know. Work went fine that night. I forgot it after a few nights. A week or so later it was the same route on rotation, but to go home instead of going to work. I was involved in a head-on collision that temporarily killed me. I woke up a week later with extra parts and a lot of damage. My best friend asked me what route I had taken home and I lost it, because it was the route I had seen death on before. Talking with my son when he was 3 or 4 years old while he was playing with a Darth Vader toy in his mom's lap. Talking about the Wiggles or Barney or whatever. Completely unprompted, he said nonchalantly, "Dingo cold. Dingo cold." And goes back to playing with his Star Wars toys. I asked him what he said and he denied saying anything with a giggle. My wife very clearly heard him say Dingo cold too. I never told him about my childhood best friend, Dingo, being killed in an avalanche 10 years earlier. I've related this before, but I'll repeat it again. I can think of a few things that happened in my first year of college. I used to live in an apartment kind of place on campus with 3 other people. We all had our separate bedrooms but shared a living space. It was on the 7th floor to give a better idea. Once, I woke up at around 2 a.m. to find that my phone was automatically playing a song. I closed the app, but it happened 2 to 3 times again. I would have put this down to my phone being weird, but then one of my roommates told me the exact same thing happened to her as well. This wasn't all. A few days later I woke up to a beeping sound coming from my phone, and when I checked it was apparently a sound recording. The duration showed as 0.00 though, which meant that it shouldn't technically play at all. I deleted it immediately. Another time, my roommate and I were watching a movie and had stayed up till 3. It ended and she went to sleep. After a few minutes she burst into my room and asked me what I was doing. I was confused because I was just lying in bed reading. She said that she heard very weird noises from the window, which she assumed I was making to scare her or something. I went to her room and it sounded like heavy breathing/sighing. I told her it is just the wind. We opened the window and saw that the trees etc. were completely still. I don't have the same phone, room or roommates anymore, even though I still stay on campus. I always remember this and do not have an explanation for it. When I was about 4 or 5 years old, I remember waking up in the middle of the night and walking to the stairs. I remember closing my eyes for a second at the top of the stairs, and when I opened them I would be at the bottom of the stairs. I would run upstairs and close my eyes and the same thing would happen again. It happened at least 4 to 5 times until my parents called me to go to bed because they could hear me run up the steps. It's weird because I was wide awake and do not have a history with sleepwalking. I still think about it. And wonder how that was possible. I was playing with our dog in the living room. At the time I was around 9 years old. We were doing our usual, only play like this when mom isn't home else she'll tell us to stop, type of playing. So basically, playing fetch in the living room. At one point I threw the toy which caused it to ricochet out of the living room into the kitchen. Franz, our dog's name, chased it and disappeared around the corner to get it. At that exact moment the front door opened, and mom walked in with Franz on a leash after a 2-hour walk over the beach and dunes. I tried to explain, but can't. I played with him for at least 15 minutes in apparently my imagination, but I just don't believe that. When he's such a good boy he learns how to astral project to play with you while he's away. I work in hospice, spend a lot of time around dying people. About a month and a half ago one of my longer-term clients was actively passing. That can involve hallucinating, seeing and talking to people who aren't there. Happens a lot, there's nothing wrong with it. It's the dying person's brain trying to grasp with their new reality. So, I work overnights. My client was wide awake, talking to people who were in the room with her but who weren't in the room with me. Which was fine. I'm okay with that. Until she started describing people I knew who had passed. I almost quit my job that night and told myself I wouldn't return to her. Most of the rest of her hospice care team started quitting in the next few days, and I ended up staying with her until the end. That one weird night was the only time she was talking to my dead family members. I'm still kind of effed up over it. Premonitive dreams, mostly as a child, growing fewer and further between until they stopped in my early 20s. The last I had was dreaming about the death of someone I cared very dearly about. A day later they drowned. That one affected me so badly that I think something simply switched off in my brain, and I no longer have premonitive dreams. I do, however, trust my intuition a lot in various circumstances. I constantly had dreams of a red-haired kid in my dad's childhood home. It was my paternal grandparents and all my dad's sisters who lived there never had this ghost. No one believed me when I talked about this kid. He began to play in the bathroom with me because he loved to play in water in my dreams, and it was downstairs so the adults wouldn't hear the water running. We moved out, thinking this imaginary friend was a scream for help or that, to my very superstitious parents, a ghost was contacting me. I recall an incident where I woke up in the bathtub with the water running one night and moving out 3 days later. My dad's cousins moved in and their children also talked about it. Mystery ginger kid with blue overalls and green shirt. Socks only and horribly stained throughout. I had never met these kids before at that point, but I instantly loved them for backing up my story of the ghost kid. To the rest of the family, I was being bratty because I was no longer the only child. The weird part was that the kid inhabited the kitchen, he inhabited the bathroom and backyard in my dreams, and constantly asked for food, whereas he only liked to splash water in mine. My dad's cousins had the house blessed by the local priest, when in the mornings 1 or 2 of the 5 kids would be seen covered in food stains, or dead asleep on the kitchen floor surrounded by half-eaten food. A therapist explained it as a shared psychosis, but it doesn't explain my own version of the kid and his fascination with food for the other children.